Hello, and welcome to this edition of How To with Seeto. Today, we're going to be talking about Cyber Essentials for startups and how the certification can strengthen and build credibility for a business. I'm Laurene Hamilton, co-founder and managing director of Seeto, who on a daily basis work with startups, helping them with their tech, cybersecurity, and IT support. I'm joined today for this fantastic discussion by my colleague Phil, and two fantastic companies, CyberSmart and Restless. Jamie is the co-founder and CEO of CyberSmart, and we also have Sara, who is the co-founder and CTO of Restless. So I think we're all here. Brilliant. Nice to see you all. So first, we'll just do some intros. So if I can hand over to Phil, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself.
Thanks, Laurene. So I'm Phil Saldana Bailey. I've been working with Cyber Eseentials now for almost a decade. It doesn't feel that long. Initially as an IT manager, achieving certification for my organization, then as a consultant, advising organizations, big and small, on cyber and information security. I became a Cyber Essentials assessor in 2020, but I've since hung up that hat. And now I head up security operations here at Seeto. So not only looking after our Cyber Essentials certification, but supporting our customers to improve and demonstrate their cybersecurity maturity.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. And Sara?
Hi, I'm Sara Stephens. I'm the CTO and co-founder over at Restless. Our mission is to help and inspire the over 50s to get more from life. We have gone on quite the journey over the last 7 years. We've gone from just the two of us, my co-founder and I, over to 50 people in 3 years, and then it come a little bit back down again. And we've been on, I've been on a huge learning curve during that time, having previously been in a big enterprise company where I was focused on delivery, technology delivery, to now wearing all the hats, including sort of SecOps and data protection as well. So lots of learnings from there.
Oh, excellent. I'm excited to have you here. And then Jamie, over to you.
Thank you, Laurene. And just about questions, definitely make them spicy if you can. We like difficult questions to use this opportunity. Jamie spent the last 15 years building tech. I'm breaking it. So background in software development, ran a digital agency, and then cybersecurity consultant. Like Phil, spent a lot of time studying standards, but also doing security testing, things like security architecture and penetration testing, all the way up to the really fun stuff, governance, risk and compliance, so ISO standards, etc. And I'm super interested to be here today and talk about Cyber Essentials specifically, but just generally around how we can make security more accessible. Our mission at CyberSmart is really about how we can bring something that can be quite challenging and daunting and make it accessible to many more businesses, especially startups and smaller businesses. As part of that, we do a lot around Cyber Essentials. We're the leading certification body in the UK. And our philosophy is to give businesses complete cyber confidence when it comes to their IT and security.
I'm not sure how spicy my questions are, but we shall see. But I think we've got a good balance here. And obviously we are all experienced in the startup world, which is exactly where we're leaning into today. So to kick us off then, Jamie, for those that are unfamiliar with Cyber Essentials, would you be able to give us a quick overview of it and also why you think it could benefit startups?
As Phil mentioned, the standard itself is now a decade old. So it celebrated its birthday recently. So a long time. I remember when they first launched it, and I think they were expecting 10,000 businesses would adopt in year one or something like that. And it was probably a few hundred. As many people will be aware, standards do take time. But ultimately, it was designed in order to provide a robust baseline for cyber hygiene. And I think it's a really important factor of Cyber Essentials is the vast majority of cyber risk, whether you're small or large, lies with doing the basics consistently. And Cyber Essentials is a really good framework for doing that. There's a recent stat that came out from the NCSC, the National Cybersecurity Centre, around insurance claims, and 92% less claims for companies that had Cyber Essentials versus those that don't. So it's 9 in 10 claims avoided if you have Cyber Essentials. So it's really all around that baseline. I think it's super relevant for startups because it often makes up the same core controls as you'd see in standards like ISO and SOC 2. So if you are working towards them, Cyber Essentials is a really good baseline. We as a company, we have Cyber Essentials, and actually it fills in a lot of the controls for our ISO as well. So it has context more broader than that. And I think the last point I'll make on Cyber Essentials is I think it's probably the single best ROI you can, or return on investment you can make in the security world. It really will take you through the basics and making sure that you have those in place.
Phil, from your experience working with startups, what are some of the biggest security threats that are seen, and why can, based on everything that Jamie just said there around really kind of getting those basics right, how can Cyber Essentials help to mitigate some of those security threats?
Realistically, a startup doesn't have it worse than any other small business. The majority of cyber threats are pretty indiscriminate, and these are attacks that are kind of thrown out a really broad attack surface. See what sticks, essentially. I know in the latest survey that the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology did, phishing made up the most reported threat facing businesses. So it's not sophisticated threats. It is those kind of everyday threats that are around us both in our personal and professional lives. But we are seeing that they are increasing in frequency and sophistication. What I find with startups is where they tend to differ, and I'm talking about the businesses, particularly when they come to an organization like ours, they tend not to have the governance in place. They might be going to John Lewis to buy their laptops. They might not be worrying about some of the security controls that we're going to encourage them to put in place. And so that governance layer that you build as you mature as a business, that's what we're focusing on today. And that, I think, is where startups really can invest a small amount of time and get a real massive impact from a cyber hygiene and cyber maturity perspective.
There's a really interesting thing I've heard from quite a few investors in that community is as soon as they raise a funding round, then they actually become more prominent as a target, because then they're like, oh, we just raised £1 million or dollars. And therefore, they know they don't have the governance in place, right? So then they become more of a target. So I think that's maybe just one point for the startup, is that is an elevated period of risk for many of us.
Sarah, so I can't wait to hear how you're going to answer this one. So from your perspective then, do you believe that startups should be prioritizing this kind of thing quite early on?
Building a business is really, really hard, especially when you've got revenue pressures. Like just survivability is like massively, obviously, important. And one of the hardest things that I certainly found was, what is the right time to do something like this? Like, what percentage of my time should I be allocating of this? And the more you scratch the surface, the more you realize you don't know, and that it gets even more scary the more you sort of realize there is to it. And I think that it certainly for me as a fledgling CTO, it was like, oh, that's the boring bit. I want to do the exciting bit of building the application and getting users to come and enjoy and all the great services that we're going to provide. There comes a point, I think, like, what is your risk? Like, this would all be risk weighted, right? Like, what are you betting now by not doing the stuff, the Cyber Essentials, or even having a little bit more awareness of things? And that actually can ramp up really, really fast. So there was just two of us to start with, and we were creating a POC, and that's fine. And to Jamie's point about, once you've raised a decent amount of cash, you're now on the radar, you're now out there, and thinking about what's that inflection point. Are you FCA? So regulatory side of things obviously brings that in way early. So FCA, health regulation, that you need to be really, really on top of to even be taken remotely seriously. As your membership base starts to get bigger, so we're now over 1 million members, like that is a very serious amount of personal information that we need to now make sure that we're looking after and educating our team. So I don't think there's like a specific size of company or amount of funding that will say that is the right time. It's more like, what's your risk? Like, what are you and risk is probability and impact, right? It's the last responsible moment, right? And that's really, really hard. I think chipping away at it and that kind of incremental evolution has been what's worked for us, because I think if you do it as a big bang, it just does feel too onerous and too much, where I've still got to make sure that we're on delivery targets and things like that. So yeah, I don't have an exact answer, but that's kind of the journey we've been on at the moment. And Cyber Eseentials was a really good forcing framework for us. So the things I just didn't know about it, having gone from a massive team before, where it was somebody else's job. It was like, oh, this is something I have to care about now and I have to do. So it's really helpful for that.
Going back to Jamie, when you started talking about, you've just secured a round of investment then. So with the fact that with that happening, you could be then seen as a not prime target, but a target of some kind. How does achieving the certification impact things like that? But it could also be that even if you haven't necessarily secured funding at the moment, it could be, does it impact investor confidence? Does it really help you secure that round? Or does it also mean that by doing something like this, it gives you that little bit more credibility if you're trying to do business with larger organizations?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that. It's pretty much any external stakeholder is going to care about your security posture and your ability to protect the data that is probably the core of your value of the company, right? If you're handling customer data or you're building IP, like writing code, then that's the core of your value. So if that gets impact, then you're impacting your company's value. So that's from your customers who are trusting their data with you. We see the thing with 23andMe right now. Like obviously it's under like special category data, sensitive data, under Data Protection Act, but still everyone's rushing to like, well, what's going to happen if this company goes bankrupt, right? And that's the kind of reaction you don't want your potential customers, your prospects to have as a startup. You want people to feel confident about doing business with you, and Cyber Eseentials can provide a really good baseline for that. I think when we look at investors more broadly, often if you're doing a later stage round like a Series A, they'll have this in their due diligence anyway. They'll be doing a technical deep dive. They'll be looking at your software development lifecycle, like how do you write code? How do you test it? Do you run any automated security tests? How do you keep your packages up to date? Do you have a list of all your packages, all 25,000 of them, including dependencies? So they'll look at your software supply chain elements like this. They'll look at governance, risk, and compliance, and a really fast track way of proving to these kind of stakeholders is saying, hey, we've got a certificate here. It's not just us. I've read countless security pages that say something along the lines of, we do our utmost to protect your security. It's like, that means nothing nowadays. Like, you need something to prove that you've actually gone for a process, a standard, to demonstrate that. And the other point I mentioned, probably around larger customers and government. So government now requirement, new policy procurement notice was released in February. All government that's handling basically any kind of confidential data will need to have this in order to supply government, but also large enterprises too. Like big banks are putting this into their supply chain, not just their direct suppliers, but also the suppliers of their suppliers as well. So if you ever plan on supplying larger enterprises or government, it will be a requirement regardless. And the last point I'll make, basically there's lots of reasons, but everyone outside your company cares that you're secure and can prove it. Last point is around insurability. So insurers now they've had these things for a long time. Some of you may have had the displeasure of filling them in, those statements of facts, where you have to go through a whole questionnaire, not too dissimilar to like a form you might get from a large enterprise too, but it's basically stating all your controls. Most of those controls will be covered in a scheme like Cyber Eseentials, where, are you updating your devices? Are you training your staff? Are you onboarding and offboarding people correctly? Pretty basic stuff, right? But if you don't do those, that's where risk is. So if you want to get insurance, and often this kind of ties in with the point around investment as well, then you're going to need to do some basic stuff. So fast track way of appeasing all those external stakeholders is getting a certificate to prove it. Something like ISO is great, but that is a serious commitment. that is something for most organizations going to take them quite a few months of time and effort to get to. So there needs to be a really strong commercial driver behind it. So I think lots and lots of reasons that you should care, and others do care as well.
I could not agree more, actually. It's more than the certificate, actually. It's the being able to evidence with your documentation. It forces you to have that, and you absolutely have to have that for later funding rounds. We've been through a few, and actually it's mostly from our experience, it's mostly heavy on that side of things, because there's a lot of legal implications involved. So it accelerates your ability to go back and not sort of hinder the process, which can take a long time. And at any point during that funding roads, like, people can get cold feet or pull out. So you don't want to draw that out as much as possible. And the same for clients. I've recently this week been through 2 heavy due diligence forms, 90, 100 questions, and that would have taken me so much longer had I not had the documentation there to hand to kind of reference, pull back, already just. It takes a long time anyway, and I have to do it in stages every time. But at least it's not taking me weeks and weeks, because I've got to go and think, oh no, actually, should I have that policy in place? What do they actually mean when they're asking that question? Is often something as well. So I could not agree more. And to the point around credibility, it's just the fact that you're able to say, well, here they are, I've got them, and I'm quickly to respond with them, really helps. I don't think the general public really care if you have the Cyber Essential badge on your website, if I'm completely honest. But they do care if there's a data breach, right? They do really care about that.
The American Cybersecurity Organization recently suggested that I think 60% of businesses that had experienced a cyber breach, small businesses specifically, closed within 6 months of experiencing that breach. And a lot of that comes down to essentially betraying that trust and not taking the care that's required. So as much as it is imperative for that kind of B2B sales, actually having the ability to reduce the number of insurance claims that are made means that Cyber Essentials is clearly doing something to improve the security of those businesses, because they're not having to reach back on that worst case scenario coverage that they have.
So Jamie, what does the certification process look like?
Do you want me to go end to end, because it's quite extensive?
maybe not in full detail. Maybe just a bit.
I'm like Phil, which is I'm also an auditor and assessor as well. So I'll give you the kind of rundown on Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essential Plus as well. I think it's worth touching on briefly too, because some people may have heard of that or been asked for that specifically. So Cyber Essentials is basically a self-assessment questionnaire or a self-attested questionnaire. So that means you've got to fill in a set of questions, about 50 to 60. There's a new standard coming out very soon with some minor improvements for accessibility. So you've got to fill in these questions that ask you things like, what laptops and devices do you have? What operating system they're running? How many mobile phones do you have? How many people work from home? So basically, Sarah's point is you've got to go and produce this evidence from somewhere, and that starts to build up your documentation that is important for your security posture. So you've got to go and discover all that stuff. And there's 5 control areas that will ask around things like access controls, or people running as admins on their local machine. Have you set up 2FA on your cloud accounts so no one can get to your email without that second factor as well? So it asks a series of questions which I think most people would probably be able to understand and relate to. Where you can significantly accelerate this process is working with a partner like Seeto, and we work with, our main way of reaching customers is through our partners. So we work with a significant network of managed service providers and IT providers who basically deliver that wraparound. So they'll sit down with you and guide you through those questions. This is what that means. Oh, it's okay. We can use this platform to get all that data to fill in this question. So you fill in that questionnaire. And when we've worked with startups before, we've actually done this at a few accelerators, is we've been able to go through the questionnaire in about an hour with them in person. So you can do it with someone who knows what they're talking about and knows the questionnaire. It can be a pretty straightforward process. If you start this process on your own and you go to the IASME website, you download the questionnaire, you're probably going to not know how to proceed, and it might take you quite a bit longer. So getting a bit of help and support makes that questionnaire bit really straightforward. Essentially, once you submit that, an auditor will review those questions and see if it meets the standard firstly. So if you're like, we don't bother updating our devices, we give everyone admin, we don't have an onboard or offboarding policy, they'll basically come back to you and say, hey, you need to change that in order to get this standard. So like for in our platform, for example, we have a two-way dialogue between the person that's looking to achieve certification and the auditor, so they can give feedback back and forwards until they get their organization to a state where they are compliant. The auditor is also looking for any discrepancies between your answers. So if you say we have no mobile workers, but you don't have an office address, then that's a bit unusual, for example. Or we have no mobile device, the really common one. I think almost everyone uses their mobile phone. The scope of Cyber Essentials is often a challenging bit, and there's a simple definition. It includes anything that's accessing your company data. So if you have your mobile phone and you're accessing your email, or people accessing it, your team are, then they're still within scope. So that device needs to be up to date. It needs to be still supported. It needs to not be jailbroken and have a PIN or a passcode set. So there's a series of kind of technical requirements that are around that. Anyway, that's kind of the mid-length version. You submit the questionnaire, the auditor gives you feedback, and then you get certified. And that can happen in as quick as 24 hours. So it can be relatively quick. And the more prepared you are, the quicker it is, and the more support you have, the easier it is on your workload. That's Cyber Essentials. And I think most organizations, especially smaller organizations, can probably go through this in a day or so. Like, let's just make sure we have all this stuff in place, make sure we're all up to date, we've got the policies we need, etc. Cyber Essentials Plus, in theory, is just an audited version of Cyber Essentials. So it uses the exact same framework, technical controls. However, the auditor will go and check that what you've written on the application is actually true. So they'll scan your devices, for example, and they'll ask you to show them some stuff like, can you open a file attachment that is a fake virus and not a real virus, just one that will simulate a virus. And if it loads, that means your antivirus isn't working correctly, for example. So the auditor will take a sample of devices and look at those and test they meet the requirements. What's really unusual and interesting is a lot of people don't pass Cyber Essentials Plus straight away. They have challenges and stuff they need to resolve. Now, working with a partner or with CyberSmart, essentially that we build that into the process, so we understand that people are going to have issues and there's going to be some gaps. Maybe they've bought a solution, and this is one of the challenges. Maybe we don't want to go to like security products, but one of the challenges of security products, really hard to know what works, what doesn't work. If you bought a vulnerability management tool that isn't a very high quality one, like a robust one that is PCI DSS approved, for example, then you're going to have gaps in that audit that pop up. The auditor's going to say, oh yeah, you've got some stuff on your device and your scanner that you've got doesn't look at that. Anyway, that process again can be as quick as an hour or so, but if you have work to do, it can take a couple of days to get that remediated. The auditor will then test again and then issue your certificate. So I've given you a little bit of the gory details because a lot of people struggle with these bits in between, because in theory, we're all doing baseline cyber, right? Everyone's like updating their devices and like setting up 2FA, but in reality, there's often a difference between what we say we do, what we'd like to do, and what's actually happening. And Cyber Essentials basically teases out those differences and highlights them to you so you can implement it.
It's so easy. So it sounds really easy.
Well, it can be done in 2 days from start to finish. So it can be. The interesting bit is obviously maintaining it, right? Because once you've done that, fast forward a year's time from now, if you've basically just completely neglected this and just said, no, that's great, we'll just like leave it to one side, it means you have to restart that process again in 12 months' time. But if you have actually implemented this and say, okay, we're going to do patch Tuesdays and we're going to update our devices on a Tuesday, and we're going to make sure we have proper onboarding and offboarding and we set up everyone's accounts correctly, the next time you come around to audit, it will take you 30 minutes because you're literally just filling in the answers, explaining what you already do. And that Cyber Essentials Plus is going to take an hour because they're just going to scan and everything's going to be good. So I'm sure we'll come on to it when we talk about maintenance, but if you're putting the basics in place, the maintenance bit is really easy, and staying certified is really easy.
So following everything that you've put in place, it's continuation of everything, not just a snapshot in time. We do it once a year. It becomes just part of your, I guess, maybe even your BAU when it comes to IT operations. Does make it a lot easier. Yes. So Sarah, then, having been through it, what was the biggest challenge that you faced when, essentially getting to that point where you were certified?
I think, again, the time, and then also selling it. My co-founder's pretty actually hot on this stuff, as he's behind it. I think just making sure that it's what, like Jamie said, what you're saying you're doing or you're committing to, you're actually doing. The maintenance bit is definitely harder. For example, you've got a salesperson that you're trying to track down and get them to update their device. So you haven't spoken, they're not getting back to you because they're busy generating revenue for your business. So you can't exactly, like, finding the balance there is a bit hard. That's probably been my hardest bit to get around. I think things that have definitely helped are some of the tooling around it, like MDM management, all of those kinds of things that you should be doing definitely help, and finding a way to make those things more efficient, like get away from manually documenting things. Like, how can we auto roll out things? How can we make this a really smooth process? Or how can our education software just do it monthly and incrementally? Our phishing software, all of that, so that it's just kind of baked into the culture as well. I've definitely seen a change in the company over the years that we've grown. I'm now being asked questions rather than asking the questions myself. Like, people are coming to me to get answers rather than me saying, are you doing this? They're saying, should I be doing this? Which is really nice, like, change to see. But that was also initially hard, right? Getting people to care about this stuff and getting them to understand why they should care. So that was challenging, but get there in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think once it's explained, also we find as well when we talk to customers, if we can basically give an example of how something might affect you in real life and why you need to ensure that you're applying your updates or doing various things, it's actually it's more understood. And like you said, it sort of flips around a little bit, and people are coming to you to be like, oh, shall I do this update?
The context is really important, and I think what I have seen not work before is going almost too wild, where you're like, oh, well, the ICO fined this huge company this much for doing this. I mean, if you overblow it, then it's always like, well, it's going to happen to me, and when way smaller than that. I think if you make it like relatable, like, oh, this family member or my friend got caught out by this social engineering hack, because that really does happen. And I think sometimes in our town halls we start talking about these sort of situations, and this is why you should make sure that you're doing a cyber training and things like that.
It's telling that relatable story, and building a cybersecurity culture is one of the hardest things that you will do, because I think people are somewhat predisposed. There was some research done that kind of came out with the statistic that people go into work essentially and go, nah, somebody else is worrying about the security here, so I don't need to worry. Actually, people were more laissez-faire in work than they were in their own personal lives, and turning that around, building out that culture is really difficult, and the only way that you can do that is by humanizing the problem and humanizing the story.
Phil, I know that you know a little bit about the new question set that's coming in April. Now, I don't think it's an entirely new question set. That makes it sound quite scary, but can you just give us a little bit of an idea of what changes are coming and what people should be aware of?
Well, first of all, don't panic. It's an iterative update. I think change in Cyber Essentials is good. One of the best things that we've seen in recent years is that the standard is being regularly renewed by experts, and it means that the number of changes are getting smaller year on year. We're not having kind of the big leap forward. But it also means that it's keeping up with security controls that people are actually implementing in their organizations. I think there was a long period of time where kind of NCSC just said, oh, it's there, have it, use it, but weren't quite so hot on updating it. So as you mentioned, 28th of April, that's when the change happens. The updated documentation is already live on the NCSC website. The updated questions set is already there. You can go and download it today. So if you are planning to certify after the 28th of April, or at least purchase your questionnaire for the 28th of April, you should get started on the new question set now. But we don't like rework, so let's avoid it. And in terms of those changes, as I say, IASME, the organisation who kind of manages the scheme, they have thought them relatively minor. I'm fairly tempted to agree. There are a number of definitions that have been updated. So instead of talking about home working, we're talking about home and remote working, acknowledging that we're not just in our home offices, but in between, we might be in cafes, co-working spaces, airports, business lounges, those sorts of things. And they've also, for the first time, acknowledged passwordless authentication. So that's your passkeys and other passwordless technologies, which just shows that they're keeping up with where the technology is going. As Jamie mentioned before, some of the questions have been reworded for clarity, which, having seen the standard improve over the years is excellent, because there are questions that repeatedly have caught up the customers that we've worked with. So that's always nice to see. And I guess I'm not going to call it the big one, but certainly the biggest change is the change from talking about patching to talking about vulnerability fixes. So it's all well and good at the moment saying turn on your automated updates, set them and forget them. They're broadening essentially the requirement there a little bit. So it's not just applying those updates, but also making configuration changes where they are appropriate to remediate a vulnerability. So there may be more steps to kind of meet the criteria than just installing an update from Microsoft, for instance.
I think you covered all the main technical areas. Just one other point to add is there is no external difference between this year's and next year. So it's just called Cyber Eseentials. Unlike with ISO, we were super excited to certify to the latest ISO version, and that was actually a huge amount more work than the previous ISO version. So I think it's what Phil's highlighted is the kind of technical differences. In reality, it's probably pretty much the same set of controls for most startups, right? Because you're not managing your own firewalls or network equipment, hopefully. You're using stuff out of the box, so you've got an IT provider that's managing that all for you. And definitions around home working, remote working, etc. Again, I think if you had applied those correctly in the first instance, it wouldn't impact you. So amount of effort should be around the same as it was previously.
So Sarah, then what's one thing you wish you knew before starting Cyber Eseentials, just before starting the process?
Probably that it's not as hard and as daunting as it appears. I think I was just very much I just don't want to do this. It's not fun. It's not the exciting bit, but actually to see some of the benefits that have come out the other side of doing it, and it isn't that much work now. We're not perfect. Definitely not, and there's definitely always things that we can do better, but we are in such a better place now than we would have been had we not done it. And just going through those fundraisers, honestly, those due diligence forms, I would have been so clueless had we not done that. So it's taught me a lot, and I am pleased that we've done it, and we did spend the time fairly close to the beginning. I will say not right at the beginning when we were first doing it, but fairly close to the beginning. And I know you helped us with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what a turnaround.
Yeah. Dragged me kicking and screaming potentially.
Yeah. This is boring stuff. I don't want to do this. Honestly, it's beneficial. So Phil, any tips on sort of quick security wins for startups that they could implement today if they weren't necessarily in a position to go and do Cyber Eseentials and become certified?
Absolutely. I think we touched on all of them already. So none of these should be a surprise. But I think the first one, really, multi-factor authentication. If you haven't turned it on everywhere, go and turn it on everywhere. Nearly every service that you will use as a startup will support in some way multi-factor authentication. It's very, very, very rare that we find one where it's not possible to turn it on in some form or factor. It significantly reduces the risk of unauthorized access. You need something so that's your password, and you need something you have, and that might be a token generator on your little app, or it might be a little fob, or it's something, a second factor essentially there to help you log in. So somebody with your password, they still can't get in, and that's protecting you against those phishing attacks that are desperate to get at your password. I think antivirus or anti-malware, it's not sexy, it sounds basic, but it is necessary, and that's even for Macs. There's still this preconception that I use a Mac, I don't need antivirus. I guess my favorite thing to share here is Apple brought out their shiny new M1 processor 1 November. By January, the bad actors had created malware that ran natively on those new Macs. There are organizations that still haven't updated their software so that they're running natively on a Mac, and the malware bad actors are way ahead of them. So they will always be ahead of the game, and anti-malware is really important. And then I think the last one, and it's not specifically a Cyber Eseentials control, at least not yet, and I expect to see it maybe coming in the next few years, and I think Jamie knows where I'm going, is backup. It is mentioned in the standard. There's a little kind of note right at the end that backup is important. Data loss can be catastrophic for a business. If you lose your customer database, you lose that information. Not only is there the reporting out to the ICO potentially, but also you're struggling then to serve those customers. And I think there's a bit of a misconception that everything that is in the cloud is backed up automatically, and that really isn't the case. And certainly, all of those things are things that we can help with at Seeto.
Could I add one to that, Phil, which I have found brilliant, is a phishing simulator of some kind for the team, because this happens all the time. And actually, I don't know if there's any correlation here, but recently we've had an influx. Like, it just seems to, and because of AI, they are getting so much better, and so it's so much more impressive and harder to detect. So the phishing simulators have been great for the team, not as a punishment, by the way, just as an educational tool. Yeah.
You don't name and shame
when they
after.
catch them now. No, there's no name and shame. Everyone's like, I caught them.
I think the security awareness training and phishing simulation, really important part of building that secure culture. And it's not just that people do the training and then they're suddenly smarter and more aware. It's the signal that you're giving as a founder that this is a really important. We want you to take time out of your day to learn about the importance, and we're prioritizing it. And it starts to shift that mindset around the one that Phil mentioned, where people kind of go to work mode and it's someone else's problem. You want people to feel like it's their problem, but also the tips that they're learning through that training and through phishing will help them in their personal life. It will stop them from falling victim to a smaller scam or a crypto thing or something that they see, because they are getting far more sophisticated. So we're super focused on building that human firewall, as a lot of people call it, because it's a really important part of an organization. We've actually got a new product coming out next week for phishing. So check that out. Seeto, I don't think you even know about that. Official
I knew about the learning platform and the changes that are coming there, but I didn't know there was phishing. So thank you for that exclusive.
Keep it under wraps. The team will kill me otherwise, because they have like product launch plans.
You've just ruined it. I love
it. So Jamie, once certified, how can startups stay compliant? It's not just startups, but how can anyone stay compliant once they're certified?
I feel like it's been like an undertone for this whole conversation is like just maintenance. Like we are 8 years old. We did our ISO 27001 in year 1 when we were 4 people, and that was a big lift. Now we were security experts, security consultants, so we kind of knew what standard was about and how to implement it, etc. That being said, we're now 70 people and been able to maintain that same structure, framework, policies. Obviously, we refresh them, revise them, but it's been so much easier to grow the company with that framework in place. Like, I can't imagine what would happen if we were where we're at now and we're going to implement this. It would be like 6 months with change management, right? And it's very, very distracting for the business. But instead, we've managed to build it part of our secure culture. So I think implement early. What was that phrase you used, Sarah? I love it. The last reasonable point.
Last responsible moment.
Responsible. It's a great quote. I don't think this webinar is the audience's last responsible moment. However, I think it is a moment that they can start on this journey. They can start small. They don't even need to get certification, right? They can also start with implementing the controls. Like, let's just put in place MFA. Let's set you up with a really slick password manager so everyone can like log into stuff and without any friction. Let's help you set up a good patching cadence, make sure that your data is backed up if something goes wrong. So there's really basic stuff that's like core, good ROI. It's going to help you to manage the biggest parts of risk, and then you get certification when that time comes. So when you have a prospect or something, or you need to get insurance, or you're going for a funding round. So I think probably my biggest takeaway is like start today something. Even if you just take the tips that Phil's giving you, go and implement those. That's a good starting point.
Excellent.
I think you're being very, very modest, because I was fully expecting you to mention Active Protect here.
Oh yeah. Cybersecurity Protect does do all of the stuff we've talked about on the call. Yeah. So we've developed a product that helps companies with this journey and implements all the controls around there. So like, make sure that you know what assets you have, tells you if something's coming out of date, helps to train your staff. It does stuff like vulnerability management as well. So it's kind of an all-in-one, really simple, accessible thing for your desktop and mobile devices that can help you with Cyber Essentials and other frameworks too. But I really just want people to go away and do something about security rather than use CyberSmart. If you use CyberSmart, that's great, and we'd love to have more people using our platform. Speak to one of our partners, speak to Seeto, or your MSP, who probably already works with CyberSmart.
So Cyber Essentials, great starting point. Obviously, we know that risk and things like that, it's not necessarily you want to do it when there's two of you just for the sake of it, but understanding at what point you are on the journey when it fits in well. But once you've done it, how do you see it fitting into your broader security journey as you scale?
I think like Jamie and Phil both really said, really, it's the foundations for something bigger, and then that you can evolve from there, and the next thing not being as scary. I think for us, right? You're aware of the terminology, educated in the space. There's obviously always going to be more to learn and more to kind of engage with. But I think having that as a baseline is really handy. We probably need to go and do Cyber Essentials Plus, to be honest. I'm sold, Jamie. Thank you.
There was one point I wanted to add earlier. Is I don't know if anyone on the call's done an ISO audit or a SOC 2 or any of those higher, or they filled in their FAQs, and it feels like you are being cross-examined on a witness stand or something. Cyber Essentials isn't like that. Everyone that's involved in the process, from the auditors to companies supporting like C2, are there to help you. It's more like a coach. And so that's one of the big differences with the standard, is it's designed for everyone to put in place that baseline. So with that understanding, it's designed to be accessible. Questions aren't supposed to trick you. And if there are any gaps, then people are there to help you close those gaps. So it's not like someone's going to just basically say, no, you fail, and give you it's not like doing a driving test. It's more like doing driving lessons where they're coaching you on how to improve. It's really, if you haven't been through the process, probably something that people are not aware of.
I would just say we've been using CyberSmart for a number of years now, and it really does make the process a lot easier. I think the fact that they're not only providing the information and guidance, and having stepped back from being an assessor and kind of losing that connection with IASME, the body who are kind of determining how the audit happens, it means that we still have an awful lot of information, which makes helping our customer base to achieve the standard so much more straightforward. Help really for us, because as much as we understand the technical challenges, we don't always understand what it is that the assessor is looking for, and having that direct line and that support back from the CyberSmart team really helps.
Yeah, I think getting the external support has been massively unlocking for us as well. It doesn't, for us, what was really useful is it didn't have to be like a commitment forever. It was like, help us with this bit, great, and then come back and help us with a little bit more, and that was a really nice relationship. And it did feel like a coach. It does feel like a coach. It's not sort of slapping us on the wrist all the time.
So then, before we close, I'd love to just know your final thoughts. Maybe just one thought though, because of time. But essentially just something that you want to just share as a bit of a close from your side.
I definitely don't have anything profound. I think one of the things would be, and this is hard to do, but trying to make this area fun for the team in any way that you possibly can, in order to get them to engage with the topic, because it can feel, compliance-y type stuff can feel a bit dry. So I think if you can not trivialize it and its importance, but find the joy and the fun parts of it to get people engaged, I think works really well.
I love that. I'd love to hear how as well. But that's great. Phil?
I think I'd just like to echo and build on something that Sarah said before. I think cybersecurity really, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's something that you are going to continually be working on. And I don't think you should see Cyber Essentials as the end of the marathon, but more that kind of water point, because it's something that you're going to keep coming back to. And it's giving you an element of kind of that feeling of having succeeded at something, because, well, it's great to have the certificate and it's demonstrating that you are doing what's required, and kind of gives you that boost.
And Jamie, over to you.
Yeah, we want something profound now, Jamie.
I think the people that have made it this far into the webinar have probably already converted, and that is the unfortunate thing about cybersecurity, really, because the people that attend these types of webinars they're aware of cyber risk. And I think probably the takeaway for people is like, make your team aware of that, make other founders you speak to, and try and build this into your personal, your professional life. Because I feel like in the startup community more collectively, we don't really talk about this as like a key area. There'll be some people that are hot on it, like Sarah's co-founder, and you've seen it, or you've written software before, or you got hacked by some script kiddie in the 90s, and you're like, that's never happened to me again. But like, let's not like have to expose everyone to those lived experiences to be able to deal with the challenge around cyber, because we know the risk is there. It's only getting more challenging. Nation states, more pressure from governments, more pressure from large enterprises, supply chains, etc. So I think probably the biggest thing is do something about it, really. We've given lots of advice, guidance on how to do something about it, and educate others and take the message forward. Tell others it's not as hard as it looks. Join webinars like this, like Sarah, and tell others that I did it. Look at me. I've got my badger achievement. I've reached space camp. And then we went on to conquer the whole mountain.
Yeah, that was beautiful. That was great. Okay, well, listen, that is all we do have time for. But thank you to our amazing panelists and to the audience for joining. I do have a slide which will just give information on how to get in touch. But broadly, if you do want to get in touch with anyone from today, you've got their email and you've got their LinkedIn. So if there is somebody you want to chat to because you want to get advice on it, then obviously feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Laurene.
All right. Oh, brilliant.
Thanks very
Okay.
much, Laurene.